All right, we're here, episode 190, last episode of the year with Christian. Is it Berger?
That's true.
Is that how you pronounce it? Berger?
Berger.
So we're here, Max. Hey, Max, good to see you again. We're last episode of the year. Everybody's checking out after today, except for me.
That's the plan. Oh, yeah.
Us folks here in the U.S., we have to judge it out for another week.
Well, you have Thanksgiving to take a few days off, so
that's true. That's true.
Yeah, so.
All right, so what do we got for news here? Anything?
Well, end of the year, and we had a few releases out. So all kind of, not fading out. What's it called? Slowing down. And even Insights here will take, what did we calculate? 3 weeks of vacation?
Something like that.
We'll be back on January 13th on, that's you, Eric, yeah. Quarkus testing landscape.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Yeah. Telling these guys before, I was telling Christian beforehand, it's kind of good that this episode came before because it saves me from having to talk about some stuff.
Yeah, you can skip some parts.
I can skip some stuff. It says, hey, just go back and rewatch the last one.
Actually, there was one thing I actually wanted to show. I just think about it here. We had where are we? Here, let me share the screen if this works. We had a funny, someone reported opened a PR to our README, and this Guru base here.
Can you make this screen bigger?
So they, yes, whoa.
There we go.
So you go to Guru base and search for Quarkus, then it comes up. And they indexed, we put in the Quarkus docs, the Quarkiverse, GitHub, and a bunch of the YouTube videos. So if you want to ask a question about Quarkus, for example, is there a video talking about what could you Wiremock? Wiremock, yeah, let's do that. Quarkus. So it is like, AI craze. So that we don't have it like this is just because we think it's like they offer for the community to host these things. There's a bunch of other stuff, but we just set it up last week, and it's pretty good in the sense that this would actually use our documentation, the Quarkus docs, etc., to provide an answer. Something we've been pondering to do ourselves too, but now there's this like service. So if you want to try it out, do the Guru base Quarkus, and it's a thing.
That's pretty cool.
But no. We actually had two. It's talking about the one that's coming. Nice.
That's this one.
Yeah, cool. That's too. Nice. So so they've seemed to have done a few guts, and at least the queries I've had has been, I'd say, very full and complete compared to using normal ChatGPT, that kind of thing. Anyway, that's a fun little tidbit of anything news.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I'll kind of promo before we kick it off here is the J Champions Conference, which is coming up in the end of January. So this is virtual online. It's free. We've got 28 different sessions. I'm one of the organizers of this. So we've got 28 different sessions on lots of different topics, but there are a bunch of Quarkus topics. I'm doing a talk on testing and test-driven development. I know Holly's got a talk in there about efficiency and the secrets behind what makes it so efficient. I think Mario's got an AI talk. Daniel O and Kevin Dubois have a talk in there, and I think there's a couple others Quarkus that aren't done by Red Hatters.
Are there any other talks? Because you got to fill up the conference this way. So
yeah, there's 28 different talks. So it starts on Thursday. So there's 7 talks each day. So there's one about concurrency, serverless Java. There's a bunch of stuff all done by different Java champions. So each person has a single talk here. I'm in there. I think I'm there on the Monday.
Cool.
Holly's in there. Yeah. So sign up. There's, find it on social media. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. It's virtual. You don't have to go anywhere. Just, 4 good days of interesting content.
Very nice.
All right. Without further ado, here's Christian. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me. I'm Christian Berger. I'm a software developer and co-founder of TechSpace. tech space is specialized in writing enterprise applications, especially in migration of legacy applications to the cloud. In that context, we're using Quarkus. So one of our
what kind of application you said? Nazi? What was the?
Sorry, pardon?
You said some kind of application that you use Quarkus for.
Legacy applications, so especially applications running on the mainframe. So we have some special knowledge there in analyzing old COBOL stuff, and we do a lot of cloud migrations in that context.
Okay.
Yeah, and then our new target stack is Quarkus usually.
Okay, so you have like some automation to migrate over to Java, or is it?
There's one approach which is more which is using an automation thing, but we are more in the manual process. So we analyze the code, we try to understand what's doing. You can imagine we are talking about applications which are, I don't know, 20 years or older, right? There's no documentation or stuff like that, so you need those old. You have to understand this old technology cheese stack and to understand what's doing, and then you have to adapt that to the cloud at the end.
And how old are you, Christian?
I'm 36. But I'm already 10 years in the enterprise game.
I think you're the youngest I've ever heard say, "Hey, and I'm porting COBOL to Java."
I started my career on the mainframe, so I guess this is really special. But now I love to work with Quarkus. A completely different developer choice. But more than 10 years of Java, Jakarta EE experience.
Cool.
So,
Okay.
So I don't know. Here.
Yeah. So in that context, we are using Quarkus, and it's quite obvious there's some demand for mocking external APIs, right? If you have an application and it depends on an external API, you want to mock it, especially for example, in your local development, you don't want to call that external service actually, but you need some mocking feature, and there are plenty of tools out there. However, the team was already familiar with Wiremock, and I guess I don't have to explain that. It's quite well known. There was even a dedicated Quarkus Insight session on that, right, with Tom and Lee. Don't know Wiremock, check that out, because today we're gonna focus on the extension. But before coming to that, it was quite funny because we're using Quarkus, and there was the demand for Wiremock, and we Googled it quickly, and we found, okay, there's an extension already, and I dropped my first PR in this repository, and then I got the invitation from a Quarkus member if I would be willing to take over the maintainer role. So quite funny. So after my first PR, and that's it. That's how I came to be the maintainer for this Wiremock Quarkus extension.
Max, I think your keyboard is really loud.
Sorry. I was just gonna say that we tend to, if you see someone who's submitting PRs, we tend to go like, hey, if you want to maintain, go ahead.
So that's how open source works, right?
Yeah, that's it. So I thought it's a good opportunity to learn how to write Quarkus extensions, because before that I was just using Quarkus as an end user, writing enterprise applications for sure. But to getting the most out of Quarkus, I guess it's important to understand, at least to some degree, how Quarkus works, right? And so a good step is to understand how to write extensions, because then you have new possibilities to solve the problems.
Yeah, Christian and I were talking before you jumped on, Max, that he and I have exchanged some messages on GitHub a while back, and it's actually the first time he and I have I don't know, would you call this meeting face to face or meeting virtually or hearing each other speak? I guess
that's how it works.
Because it's something that I've used pretty heavily, and we use, and there's plenty of examples. I'm not gonna go off and steal the thunder from Christian, but we use it pretty heavily in Quarkus itself. And I know even in like the LangChain extension, I know Georgios has brought in the Wiremock extension, because we use it to simulate OpenAI pretty heavily.
Very cool.
All right.
But
Okay.
Go ahead, Christian.
The show is yours.
Yeah. So maybe a good starting point why you would like to use that extension is if we start with some official testing guide from Quarkus. Hopefully you can see my screen and the font is big enough, I guess so. Yeah, and if you scroll down, there's a subchapter, starting services before the Quarkus application starts. And here it more or less describes what you need to do if you want to integrate Wiremock manually. So it describes more or less a generic concept, but the example is luckily with Wiremock, so it's very close to understand what's the idea. So at the end, if you want to integrate Wiremock to have it available when you execute your tests, there's something like a Quarkus test resource lifecycle manager. And there's an example, some boilerplate code, I would say, which describes what you need to do in order to start a Wiremock server and how to stop it. And you also have to override a method for injecting the Wiremock server. And then you need some annotation, which you have to define and stuff like that. So this is a generic way how to integrate it. However, it's not what you think about if you think about developer joy, right? So you need to copy boilerplate code. You have to think about, okay, how to use it. And this approach is also somehow limited in a sense. It only works if you execute your tests. So when doing test execution, it won't work, for example, if you are using it or if you'd like to using it in a developer mode and dev mode. So that's when I thought, okay, it makes sense to have an extension. When I joined the project, there was already an initial version. So it's not my idea to have this extension. But yeah, I've at least re-engineered, re-implemented the extension to some degree so that you can use it in dev mode and in test mode. That's the overall idea. Great. So
I'll say too, like one of the, I don't know if it's a difference, but when people generally think about Quarkus extensions, especially the ones that work in dev mode, they're typically working with containers, right? Like a data source container, will spin up a Postgres or MySQL or whatever. You've got Kafka, but I think that one of the big differences here is this is still all in JVM process.
Exactly. Yeah. So of course, you can also containerize Wiremock. There's the image there for sure. You can do that. However, I decided to go with the JVM, with the plain JVM version, just to follow the principle KISS, keep it simple, stupid at the beginning, right? So because there's no free lunch at the end, you have some benefits if it's running in a container, but you also have some additional complexity in your code. And at the moment, the extension is quite simple, so it's easy to understand. I guess it's a good starting point for everybody who wants to learn how to write extensions. So now I did enough advertisement. Anyway, yeah. So you're absolutely right. It's not running in a container, so you have less dependencies, but it also has some limitations, which I will cover later when it comes to integration testing. But yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
All right. I guess enough theory. Let's go into some code. But before that, I prepared an example so that you have a better understanding and to get an idea about the capabilities of the extension. Let's bring this up. So I have a little example project where we have a Quarkus application. And this Quarkus application provides a REST resource, so nothing special, nothing fancy. And at the end, this REST resource calls an extension service, which is at the end a REST client, which calls some external API. I'm using the code Quarkus IO/API endpoint, where you can query for extensions. You get some metadata of extensions. This is the overall setup. And yeah, that's something, perfect. That's something I just want to show you. That's the basement, and then we can start using the extension and go through the different capabilities. All right.
Cool.
So All right, so nothing special, just to get the framing. So here we have the extension record, which is our DTO, nothing special. We can hold some metadata of the extension. We have the resource endpoint I've just mentioned, which can be called, and at the end it just uses the REST client to get this extension service, which is then getting queried. So don't ask me about the benefit of this backend service and why the client is not calling the external service directly, but I guess you get the point. It's just for demonstration purposes, and then I can show you the capabilities of the extension.
Like every good Hello World application.
Yeah, like
you're trying to invent use cases.
Yeah, I guess that's what you can do in such a scenario. Everything else is getting too complex. Anyway, yeah, so this is the extension service, which is the REST client. I have a config key to make the configuration a little bit more easier, but that's it at the end. And let's jump to the application properties. I linked that REST client to stagecode quarkus.io, and that's it. I've also created a test class. Here we go. So I'm using a parameterized test to have at least 2 test pairs. And then I'm just calling the REST resource or the application, which then I expect that the result, which is actually calling then the external REST API, and I expect that the ID and the name matches the given input parameters. So nothing special. Let's execute that quickly. And the test should pass. And I guess that
this is running live now, right?
It's running live.
Yeah.
But usually my machine is powerful enough, so it should not take that long. Here we go. All right, it's running live, so we're actually calling this API. Perfect. So now let's move on to another branch. I prepared the next step. So now the idea is that we don't call the API, but we are using Wiremock to mock and then to stop, of course, the behavior. And we want to use the Wiremock extension, the Quarkus Wiremock extension to do so. So pretty clear, I guess. So let's go back. So what I did, first of all, of course, we have to add the dependency. I guess we can talk a long time why the provided scope should be used here. I had a long discussion with Eric in the past. Maybe we'll spend some time later on to discuss that.
You'll have to remind me what we talked about because it was so long ago.
Yeah. So, okay, maybe I will spend 2 minutes on that. Yeah, so the Wiremock extension is special in a sense that it's more or less technically a dev service. And yeah, you want to avoid that something ends up in your production build, right? So we have the Wiremock dependencies and you use them during test or dev mode, but you want to avoid that something ends up in the production build. And if you do it with plain Maven style, you can use the provided scope, which makes sure it does not end up in the production build. It has some limitations, and we have a long discussion on that. I've started.
Well, I guess
yeah, Max?
Just to clarify, it's not basically just saying that when at runtime, it'll be provided. Right? So that means when you build and run, it won't be included anywhere, because when you run the test and build dev mode, Quarkus will include it because the deployment module has a dependency on it, and therefore you have it.
Yeah. So the first idea was, okay, if you use the plain library, you would declare a test dependency, right? You write a test, you add a test dependency. However, this is not working for the extension. I learned that the hard way, because if you declare something with a test dependency, it's part of your test class path. However, it's not part of your class path being used in dev mode. So, in our scenario, we need something that this extension is available in both in the dev class path and the test class path.
Yeah.
Max, isn't there, I think, is it Sergey or somebody who's working on a thing to invent a new scope for dev mode so that you...
No, it's in the latest main dev mode only dependencies, but that's not what this is it?
Well, I think that's what that this is how it's trying to fit itself in, because you really only need this in either dev mode or test or integration test.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want these classes in your application packaged at, when you build your artifact.
Yeah.
Well, but you don't get that with test either, right? Test you
Right, you don't get that with test either, but you can't just be with test, because then dev mode wouldn't work.
Yeah. The other way I thought about it would be just to declare the default scope, so compile. And since Quarkus is also some kind of a build tool, just make sure that nothing ends up in your production build, right? So you can have your guard statements to make sure that no feature items getting created, or even the main code, the main logic is not being produced if you're running in the prod profile.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's some stuff which comes in there. So this would be the other option.
But so there is dev mode. So there's Alexei who worked on this.
Yeah.
But this was more for when you have dev UI, and you have all like a new feature in dev UI or JavaScript dependencies, etc. If you had that, you could by accident grow your product, the product station bits. And now there is a way for him to, basically anything that has a dev dependency will be trimmed. It will just go away. But I'm not sure that will fit here. But yeah, anyway, there is a dev dependency feature.
That's so. Yeah, usually, let's say, for example, if you take the Postgres extension, then the Postgres extension has also a main capability at runtime, because it wants to provide the JDBC driver. In addition to that, it provides a dev service, so you want to get rid of the dev service only. In that case, for this particular extension, the main capability, the main feature is the dev service itself. So you want to get rid of the entire extension, more or less. So that's a little bit different.
Yes.
So a special scenario. So if you don't want to think about it, just use provided. I'm also not sure if it would be compiled would be better, but it's a long story. It's provided. It's working with some caveats, but
the other way you'd have to do it is you'd have to have split your repo and have a runtime and a deployment artifact, and your runtime artifact is essentially empty with nothing in it. It's just an empty jar.
Yeah, it's almost empty for this extension.
Yeah,
almost. But there's still a feature build item being produced, and then it shows up in your feature set when you start the production build, and you don't want to have this, so you would need another guard statement. You could do that. But that's it, how it is at the moment. It doesn't matter. So just add the Wiremock extension dependency. It's all documented in the official documentation, so don't worry. And the only thing you have to do then at the end, you have to point your REST client to Wiremock instead of the external API. So, and I did that for dev and test mode, and I've just overwritten the endpoint. So here it's not stagecode Quarkus.io anymore, but just localhost. And I have not defined the fixed port for the Wiremock server, but I'm using some kind of dynamic port allocation. And I can just reference this property here to get that port, which is being picked up at that time. So, and in addition to that, the extension comes with some reasonable defaults. I guess this is also the idea of Quarkus, have some reasonable defaults. So you can just create the mappings in a files folder in your test resource folder structure. And then there are different ways to define your stubbing. This is now a declarative way to do it. So here I define just, okay, whenever you get the request with the method get, and this extensions pass and the query parameters is equal to this one, then I'd like to have a response, and the content should be, which is mentioned in that file. And now here I can stop the whole response. And the same is true for the other one. That's it, what I have declared. So it's almost the same.
It's just straight Wiremock, right? If you were to go to Wiremock's cloud and build a thing and export it, this is what you get, pretty much, right?
For example, you can also define it stubbing programmatically, right? There are different approaches, and
or mix and match them. That's what we do.
Yeah, you can do a lot of fancy stuff. So the tool is quite powerful. Just check out the documentation. So that's it. The test is the same. But now we have the extension applied, and I also increased the log level for the extension, so we see a little bit more what the extension is doing. And now I can just recompile it once more.
Yeah, I think the benefit of having it stubbed like that is that's what you get in dev mode, because you're not going to do the dynamic stubbing in dev mode. You do that in your tests when you want to test like your other scenarios, like your error cases, slowness, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So now you see some output here on debug level. So now Quarkus has been detected, launched in test mode, and we have started Wiremock server, and Wiremock server is listening on port whatever, and then we start the application, and then here you see even the request and the stubbed output, and at the end now the tests passes as well, but now you have called your mock and not the real API anymore. And the cool thing now is with this extension, you can also now start Quarkus in dev mode. Let's do that quickly. Here we go. So first of all,
a little bigger.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
So yeah, so here in the extensions menu, you will find now the Wiremock dev card. So it's nothing fancy, but it links to the mappings admin endpoint, and you see all the configurations you did. You can do it also programmatically, or you can call REST endpoints to configure that. So you can check your Wiremock configuration. And in the dev services part, you see the configuration. At that point, you see the dynamic port, not much more. But yeah, you get some integration in the dev UI. The thing which is more interesting is then the feature which the extension supports, which comes with the dev mode, which is the hot deployment or live reload. Let's call the extension. So now I'm calling the endpoint of the extension, and I'm expecting to get the stubbed response. And now if I go back, this is now, my screen is huge. Now let's go back. So if I modify, let's see what I'm using here. I'm using the REST client, so this one. So now if I modify the response, let's do a 1111 here, whatever, and I just do a refresh. I get the change instantly, right? That's what it's about, the dev mode. That's the cool thing. So yeah, that's another capability, not only providing Wiremock as a dev service, but also using then the features like the hot reload. And yeah, you just get that without any additional configuration. That's cool.
That's awesome.
All right, then of course you can also use a lot of other fancy stuff. The extension, let me stop that quickly. And
so if you were to run the continuous testing, it would start a second instance of Wiremock on a different port and bind the test to that, right?
Yeah, exactly. At the beginning, I've started with a fixed port, but I then figured out, okay, if you run different tests and there might be some overlaps in the test cycle, and the other server might not be shut down immediately, and then you have a blocking port. And if you want to run tests in parallel, as you mentioned, Eric, then you can use this dynamic port allocation feature, which is enabled by default.
Yep, and then there's the other use case that we came up with too. I touch on that in a little bit too, right? Where your thing is running in a container and Wiremock is running in the JVM process. So how to communicate from the container back, right?
Yeah, I have an example on that later.
Yep, cool.
Perfect. So now another feature of the extension would be the global response templating. So you can use response templating in Wiremock. It's a feature. In order to use it, you just need to enable it. It's disabled by default. You just need that configuration. And then you can do some fancy stuff, like you can, for example, here declare, this is now a fallback handler, I would say. So if there's no specific request match, then it goes back to this one. And here I just define the response. And here it's more or less using some templating functionality, so I can catch the ID from the query in the request. So this is a scenario, for example, where you query an ID and you expect that the ID is also part of the response. So you have some capabilities. It's documented in the official Wiremock documentation about the different variables which are available here.
So if you didn't use that and you made a request, would Wiremock throw a 404, like it couldn't find a match, or would it actually make the real request? Like so if you didn't do this.
Yeah. So it will throw a 404, but you can also, I guess there's some kind of proxy mechanism available in Wiremock, which then actually calls as a fallback the actual endpoint. So you can do really complex scenarios. And you can also define scenario-based testing, where you can say, okay, you try it first, it's not working. You try it a second time, and the third time it's working, and stuff like that. So Wiremock overall is really powerful. But yeah, here in this scenario, I just like to show that you can use this templating stuff, which is maybe not too interesting, but which is more interesting is another feature being provided. This is the extension scanning mechanism. So there's a concept in Wiremock, which is also called extensions, and it uses the Java service loader mechanism. I guess you are familiar with that. It's quite old. And what you can do, you can define such an extension via this mechanism. So you need to declare a file in meta-inf services, and it has to have this name here, and then you can mention your implementation. That's this Java service loader mechanism. And then in this transformer, you can do all the crazy stuff. So here it's a very simple example. I just replaced the ID, or the identifier was replaced, but you can imagine you can do any kind of modification here, quite powerful. And let's jump back. So here we have this parameters ID, which is being used, and by default, the ID will be replaced by default. And if you have this transformer enabled, then the parameters ID is not replaced with default, but in this particular scenario, it's replaced by replaced. So very simple example just to demonstrate that you can use this extension mechanism. Anyway, when I did the testing, I figured out this is only working in test mode, not in dev mode. But I guess this has something to do with the class path design from Quarkus. I'm not sure.
Well, you've got your extension defined in source test resources.
That's the reason, right? Why it's not working in dev mode. Yeah, I thought of that. Yeah, so not sure. That's the same problem, I guess, we have, for example, there's this capability where you can provide the import as SQL file in dev mode, where you can build up your database with some test data. You also have to place that in source main, set on source test. And that's something then which ends up in your production build, which you would avoid normally. And I guess this is the topic it already talked about it. So we need maybe some solution to avoid that, to provide any feature files only available for dev mode.
You could create a named folder, so like more by convention, like that you would put in like source main resources and then Wiremock extension or whatever you called it. And in the deployment build, you could bring in like the Maven resources plugin and then filter out, but you'd have to make it work in Gradle too.
Yeah. Okay.
Just I'm thinking off the top of my head.
Yeah. All right. So I guess I can demonstrate that, but it's not that interesting either. I just want to show you. You can check out the repository and you can execute by your own. It works, at least in test mode. It's not working in dev mode. But yeah, it's a feature which is available. So on the other hand, now I just showed you the demonstration how to define the stubbing in a declarative way. But of course, you can also do it programmatically. But now, since we do not use this this callback with the test manager or this test lifecycle callback. You might wondering how can I get access to, how can I get a reference to Wiremock server in order to stub to define my stubbings for a specific endpoint. And this is solved in a sense that this extension provides another dependency. Let's jump into this. So there's another dependency, and let's scroll down to the POM file. So beside the extension itself, now you can declare another dependency, which is called Quarkus Wiremock test. And that's something which should be in test scope, because that's something you only want to have available in your test class path, because it's good enough if it's just available when you execute tests, obviously. And what this dependency is doing more or less, it provides some nice integration mechanism. Let's go. It's a little bit hard. Can't see that much. Yeah, so what it provides is, for example, it provides the connect Wiremock annotation, which makes it very easy to get a Wiremock reference. So all you need to do is to annotate your test with connect Wiremock, and then you get the Wiremock instance running, or you get a reference to that instance. It's more or less using the same mechanism if you would do it manually. I've shown before in the guide, but it's just done by annotation, and you don't have to care about it. And what you can do then in your test, you can do all those stubbing in programmatically. So you can use then Wiremock register. If get is called on that with that query parameter, it will return a response with 200 and the body like that. So you have the same power as before, but it's more integrated. It makes more. It's more part of the Quarkus ecosystem. It feels more natural than maybe doing it with that test lifecycle callback. Make sense to you?
Yeah, let me ask you this. So is there a way to combine that? Because Wiremock has the ability to add extensions, and kind of my thought is like gRPC, for example, Wiremock has the gRPC extension. Is there a way, because when you do that, you have to do something specific when you configure the Wiremock server? Is there a way to do that? Like if I wanted to inject the gRPC extension into it?
Yeah. There's exactly there's one issue still open for a while now where people they already asked that. And exactly this would be the solution. So from my understanding, Wiremock provides an extension in order to support gRPC.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it would be somehow easy to use that extension and the extension mechanism to provide that, at least for testing purposes, maybe not for dev mode, or you find another way to define the service loader mechanism there. And yeah, so I guess this would be the way to go. It's still on my list, still pending, unfortunately, but maybe I have a chance to look into that in Christmas break. That's at least the idea. Yeah, but I guess this would be the way to go, using that extension, using the service loader mechanism, and to provide that feature then, depending on a specific flag or whatever, you can do it, or otherwise you would skip it.
Cool.
All right. So that's tackling that part that you can also define the stubbing programmatically. Yeah, so this is more or less the basic feature of the extension. And now, if there are no further questions, I would continue with to testing, to integration testing.
I think one interesting thing here to mention too is when you combine this, at least at test time, because I think in dev mode you can't. There's, like you said, there's really no access to the programmatic stubbing. But at least in your tests, if you had your declarative approach, you could override things that your declarative approach is capturing with alternate scenarios, right? So in this case, you make a request to. I think actually you're doing it here. Like you're changing what the result would be given a specific request, right?
Yeah.
You just got to make sure that like you roll it back at the end of your test, because it would stay there, because the Wiremock server is running in your test JVM. So as long as that test JVM is up, your override would stay present. I think I ran into that once.
Yeah.
Like, what the heck? Like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
That's
okay.
not what it says.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you have to be aware a bit about the test life cycle and when to reset Wiremock. Exactly.
Cool. This is awesome stuff. I use it all the time, so like I'm like all gung ho about it.
Cool. All right. I guess there's some potential to improve the extension, but yeah, I guess it's at least a good starting point. All right, let's talk about integration testing. I guess that's the one of the last chapter which might be interesting. So because we just talked about Quarkus test and all that stuff, but you can also use it for integration testing. I prepared 2 further slides, and then it's a hands-on session again. So we have to distinguish between 2 different scenarios when it comes to integration testing. So I call it scenario A, where we have our executable as a plain jar file, because you know that, guys. So if it comes to integration testing, you actually test the production build, right? That's the idea. For integration testing, you have your final artifact and you want to test that. And there are different scenarios, like as mentioned, having the final production build as a jar file. And then you have the challenge, which is easy in that way, that your jar file has to connect to the Wiremock server, which is easy because both are running in a JVM process on the same host. So this is a little bit of a challenge. We will cover that in a second. But there's a more interesting thing, which Eric already mentioned, that if your production build is not a final jar, but at the end it's part of a container image and it's running in a container then during test execution. This is a little bit more tricky, especially because with the current design, the extension does not start Wiremock in a container either, but just as it's running in a plain JVM process. And if it would run in a container, you could share a network and you could solve it that way. And in this scenario, with the current design, your container has to connect to the host machine and connecting there to the Wiremock server, which is a little complicated. But Eric came up with an idea and a solution. So we'll cover that. It's based on your solution. I guess it's published in the Superheroes project. I'm not sure about that, but
we'll use it in Superheroes
from there. So there's at least a solution if you use Docker. Maybe the solution looks different if you use Podman or whatever. Anyway, I guess for the future, it might be worth also to have a different flavor of the extension and to provide also Wiremock as a running in a containerized version. Then you have other challenges for sure. But yeah.
So copy all your mapping files to the container file system and all that.
Yeah, stuff. And you have to think about restarting your container and stuff like that. And yep, exactly. So this should be enough for setting the scene. There are no further questions.
I think too, like you talk about in JVM mode, I think native mode, it doesn't matter. It's the same scenario, right?
Exactly.
You're either locally on the host or you're running it in a container. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's running in a JVM in the container as a jar, or if it's actually compiled to native. It's exactly the same. At the end, you have to connect to your host machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. All right. Then let's go back. And let's jump into the basic integration tests branch. So what I did here in this branch, I just extended the Quarkus test with an integration test. I can do it because it's a simple scenario. I just test the REST API with REST assured in that case, so I don't inject any services, which I can do in Quarkus test, which I can't do if I'm running an integration test, obviously. And so that's very easy for me, so I can just extend the test. That's one thing. And the other thing is I did something here because, here I defined that only in dev and test mode, the REST client points to Wiremock. And if I'm running in the production mode, then it should point to stage code, whatever, Quarkus.io. However, I mentioned especially for integration testing, the idea is to test the production build at the end. So the build artifact is compiled with production mode. However, there's this possibility that for integration tests, you can override not the build profile, but the run profile. So all those configurations which are runtime aware or not build time fixed can be then pointed to the test profile, which I'm doing here. And so this is one idea, is to have your build under test compiled with the prod profile, but running during the test with the test profile, at least for those configurations which are runtime aware. So hopefully this makes sense. If not, there's a link here which explains a little bit more in detail why this is necessary. But that's it at the end. So I just added that and this, and I guess I also enabled the integration tests, and then I should be good to go to execute the integration test with the Wiremock extension. And this is the scenario A, by the way. So in that scenario, I do not have a Docker container yet, or at least any arbitrary container must not be a Docker container, have not to be a Docker container. So let's wait for that. And it failed. Great.
Because you changed the mapping file.
Yeah, exactly. I changed the mapping file. Good for that. So I will just clean that up. So my tests are working. Give it another try.
Fix the test to match reality. That's what we always do, right?
So now we have the Quarkus test execution, and it takes a couple of seconds, then we should see the integration tests. Yeah, here we go. So now we are executing the integration tests, and now they passed. Great. So interesting here is that the required parameters are being passed. I guess you can see it somewhere here. Yeah, you see the output. Oh, my screen is so small.
Yeah, right there. Stop.
Here it is, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So here you see the invocation, here the command, and you see all that stuff which is passed to the application under test. And yeah, this is also why I don't be so happy with the provided scope, because you have those warnings, which makes sense, right? We still have the configuration in place for the application, but there's nothing left from the extension anymore. And so that's why we get those warnings. This is also the side effect why we have scope.
Well, so what you could do there, you could put that into the, you can put percentage dev, percentage test. So these will only apply for the dev and test profile.
Yeah, but I guess I had also a long discussion on that with Eric, and I'm not sure if this is working. And because this is now now a configuration for the extension itself, and that was my initial idea. And Eric did a lot of research on that, and at the end, I don't remember exactly anymore, but the result is more or less, if you do it that way, then you will have some circumstances where it won't work. So you have to go with the default, which enables all those three standard profiles, dev, test, and prod. And you have this warning at the moment.
I'd have to go back and reread all those tickets. It's been so long.
Yeah. So at the end,
because we should get this checked with Roberto, because you shouldn't. I know it might not be pretty, but you should be able to configure the way so you don't get the warning.
Yeah, exactly. But because it's a little bit annoying. Yeah, anyway, so this is the integration test, the simple one. Then now let's look into the one which is, I guess, more interesting if the application is running in a container. Let's jump into that. Here we go, and that's based on an idea from Eric. So what I did now is I added another extension. So I'm using, I don't know how to pronounce it. It's chip, maybe. It's my favorite extension. I like it, so I'm using that to create a container image. And yeah, so that's one thing. And the other thing is in the test, which is now a little bit different, I created a profile because there's this test profile capability of Quarkus. Maybe if you don't know it, you can Google it. And within that profile, I'm looking up for a specific system property. And if this system property is set, the host name is not localhost, which is not working anymore if you're running in a container. So this is the idea how to detect if you're running in a container. There's this special DNS name, at least if you use Docker, which
works in Podman too.
It works. Okay, because they are somehow compatible because Podman is.
Yeah, as long as you have the Podman Docker API compatibility.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good to know.
I'll verify it right now, but I've been running Podman exclusively for like the last 2 months. And
yeah, okay, yeah. So you can use this DNS name, which points then to your host name. It's also, I have linked it here. It's in the official Docker documentation. Otherwise, it's using localhost, and that's the idea. So when you execute those tests and the system property is present, then you override, and that's now the nice thing. If you do the test profile, you can actually override the configuration, and now we are overwriting the default configuration. So it's not something limited to test or dev profile, but we are just overwriting now the REST client, and we are saying, okay, it's going to be replaced either by this host Docker internal or localhost, and then it's going to be replaced. This is just a convenience constant to get the port, and at the end you have just the configuration you wish to have if you're running in a container. And now let's execute that really quickly. So I just have to define that system property, and then we are good to go. Let's do it. So here we go. I just do a maven clean verify and the system property. And now it should take a little bit longer, but not too long. Executing, first of all, the Quarkus tests. Here we go. And now you see the chip processor kicks in, and now we are creating an image. And after that, now the integration tests are being executed. And you see the command which invoked the test, and the build succeeded. And this is at least a way how you can still test your application running in a container and using the Wiremock running as a JVM process on your host machine.
Cool. I think too, something maybe it's unrelated, but in the dev UI, if you have continuous testing turned on, I think was it Philip or somebody added a PR where in the logs, like it has the Wiremock has a separate tab where you can see just the Wiremock logs aggregated in a single tab. I think it was Philip. Maybe it wasn't Philip.
It could be. So I remember at least that we have enabled now this logging. So this logging feature that we pass through the Wiremock server logs here to that output stream. That's a new feature. And I guess there's somebody opened a PR, which is, I have to check it. But this could be now maybe working with that feature here. I have to double check, not sure.
Yeah, I just verified it does, like host.docker.internal does work with Podman. Like because I can see my thing says Podman run the container image, and it's pointing to host.docker.internal, and it works fine. And I even built the image with the container image Docker extension, but using Podman instead.
Yeah, cool. All right, that's it more or less. That's the Quarkus Wiremock extension. I guess a good starting point. There's still plenty of room for improvement. So because the Wiremock it's a lot of features, and if anybody willing out there to support us, feel free to join.
Just like every other open source project, PRs welcome, right?
Yeah, yeah, most welcome. Yeah.
So is there anything in the sorry, about writing the extension? Like, because one of the things is like you're not working for Red Hat, you're from outside of Quarkus, or outside the core team of Quarkus. Anything you want to share there, or anything you say could be better, we could do, or
yeah,
just perfect? Or
yeah, at the beginning it was quite tough, to be honest, because there was not much documentation available on the internet, and I've watched some streams, some videos, and you guys were mentioning sometimes a list. You had some internal documentation at the beginning where you listed all those available build items, but they were not available on the internet. They were just available on the internet.
There was no no. So there was no internal medical list. There was what's it called? Just search in Quarkus, and then in DevUI there's a list of the build items you have.
Yeah, now they are available. But in the early days, a year ago or something like that, it was a little bit hard because this list was not available. Now everything a lot is available. Now there's a huge ecosystem, so you have a lot of repositories where you can look up the code and understand how extensions work, right? So we have a lot of templates available, so this is quite helpful. And of course, you also improve the documentation. So if you look up now the documentation, how to write your extension, you have different level of complexity. There's a beginner guide and there's a more advanced guide. So this is really quite good. And I can also mention that there's a blog I remember from Peter Palaga. I guess it's a colleague of.
Yeah, he did one a year or two ago. Yeah,
I guess he is from the It's from the Camel project, exactly. And there he published some really nice slides, and he had some nice talks. I learned a lot, especially I guess some stuff is quite forwarding. It's quite simple. Other stuff like the recorder stuff, where you record bytecode, which is actually being executed at runtime with the static init and runtime init stuff. So he explained that really nicely. So if you want to learn how to write extension, I guess his blog and his slides are really good.
Did you see the thing Holly published, the extension maturity matrix? Very fancy word. If you share your link, Eric.
Yeah.
So this is So the really cool, critical. All you said about like the docs missing and stuff. That was the thing that a lot of stuff we didn't. I think we started in early 24 or early 23. Like, hey, there's a repeated pattern of we don't have enough docs. So Holly and you got like anyone like you who could give the feedback. You got that feedback, and then Holly has been improving that and helped get some of the docs up there.
Okay.
Can you share the screen, Eric? My share screen doesn't work at the moment. If you can just load that URL.
Yeah.
So this was again because people were getting like where do we start? So one of the things we did here was this.
That's not the right one.
No.
I'm getting there.
You get there.
I'm getting there. Probably
so
I've got two different browsers here, so I've got to copy URLs.
Yeah.
Restream doesn't work good in other than Chrome.
Yeah. So if you zoom in a little bit, it looks a bit weird on your gray dark theme thing.
You know, my dark theme.
Well, it's just the letters are very small on there. See, much better. Can you zoom in so you can see the drawing?
It's an image. This is an image, so even if I
zoom, it doesn't go
zoom the image.
Oh, okay.
Here, how's that?
Oh, okay. So anyway, it just shows that like different areas that the extension can help, like make it run a dev test in native, develop your features like the performance focus, other stuff. I can't see the sorry, and then below is all the different ways you can do that, or at least the common ways of doing it. It doesn't. It's not have doesn't have the technical detail. That's somewhere else. But it's just if you like, hey, if I want to do an extension, where can I start? What's the basics and what's the advanced stuff? And this is just showing all the different places to go. That's a way to start. So if you try to get an extension, you can see here, like you don't have to have everything in place. And if you have it already, you might be, oh, I didn't know I could do this. And then here should be some pointers.
That's cool.
And this is a limited document, so if there's something missing, open issue and
or
make a PR or
yourself.
There we go.
It'll be there faster if you do it yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So no, I thought that was because we spent a lot of time getting that diagram to be correct, or at least something you can agree on, because there's so many factors playing together. But I think we got a really good result.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Is this the one you were talking about, Christian? From Peter?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's some interactive guide. Yeah, you can go through it, and it's really cool because he explains all the stuff, the documentation phase and stuff like that, and he also explains he illustrates in a very simple manner at the end what is mean by static init and runtime init and stuff like that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I dropped the link in there.
It helps a lot.
Cool. Okay. I have to jump for another thing, but super thanks, Christian.
Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure.
Awesome.
It's great having you. Good to meet you. And happy holidays to you and your family. Hope you recharge and take some time off. And that shows to everybody, happy whatever you celebrate, take some time off, have fun with your families, and recharge for 2025.
Cool.
Well,
see you next year.
See you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.